I am 76 years old, and I have been sitting in this chair for the better part of this morning, trying to find the right place to begin. There is no right place. So I will just start where it hurts most. For most of my adult life, I was afraid of one person. Not afraid the way you are afraid of violence or illness. Afraid in a quieter way. Afraid of a look. Afraid of a tone of voice. Afraid of silence from someone whose silence felt like a verdict. That person was my father. He died 11 years ago. And the strange thing I have had to live with since then is this. I did not become free when he died. I became confused. Because I had spent so long trying to earn something from him that I had never stopped to ask whether he was actually capable of giving it. He was not a cruel man. I want to say that clearly, because this is not a story about a monster. Monsters are easier. What he was withholding, measured. He gave approval the way a bank gives loans, reluctantly, with conditions, and always with the suggestion that you might lose it if you were not careful. I grew up in a small house with 3 brothers. My father worked in a textile factory for 31 years. He was not educated beyond secondary school. He believed that hardness was a form of love. He had been raised that way, and he raised us that way. I do not think he ever examined it. When I was young, maybe 10 or 11, I remember bringing home a drawing I had made at school. I was proud of it. I can still see it. A landscape, hills, a house, some trees. The teacher had praised it. I put it on the kitchen table for him to see. He glanced at it. He said, "That is nice." Then he went back to his newspaper. That was it. That was the whole exchange. And I remember standing there thinking that I needed to do something better, something that would make him actually stop. I spent the next 60 years trying to make him stop. It got into everything. The career I chose, I became an engineer, which he respected, though he never said so directly. The house I bought, the kind of house he would approve of. The way I dressed when I went to visit him. The things I chose not to say around him. The opinions I kept to myself. The parts of myself I kept to myself. I married a woman named Dahlia when I was 30. She was warm and perceptive, and she saw this thing in me almost immediately. She used to say, "You change when you're about to see him. Your shoulders go up. Your voice goes flat." I did not want to hear it. I told her she was imagining things. She was not imagining things. There were years in my 40s when I would drive 2 hours every few weeks to visit him, not because I looked forward to it, because not going felt like failure, because I was still, at 43 years old, a boy trying to put a drawing on a kitchen table. My own children were growing up during those years. My daughter, Noor, my son, Tariq. I was present in the house. I was not always present in the room. There were evenings I was sitting with them, and my mind was somewhere else. Rehearsing a conversation with my father, replaying something he had said, calculating what I could do differently. Noor told me something a few years ago that has stayed with me. She said, "I used to feel like you were always half somewhere else. I never knew where. I just knew I did not have all of you." She was not angry when she said it. She is a kind person. That almost made it harder to hear. I could not tell her where I had been. I was ashamed to explain that I had been mentally living inside my relationship with a man who had been dead for years before he actually died. That his voice had taken up residence somewhere in me, and I had fed it, maintained it, given it the best seat in the room. My father had a stroke in his late 70s. He was in a hospital for several weeks and then came home, diminished. I visited more during those months than I had in years before. I kept thinking that something would be said, that proximity to death would open something in him. He died on a Tuesday morning in February. We were not there. I got the call from my brother. There was no final conversation, no moment of clarity between us. He went the way he had lived, without offering anything he had not planned to offer. I stood at his funeral and felt the strangest combination of grief and something I am still not sure has a proper name. Not relief, not anger. Something more like the feeling you get when you have been waiting for a train and you finally accept it is not coming. A settling. And also a kind of horror at having waited so long. The years after were not what I expected. I thought perhaps I would feel lighter. I did not. I felt unmoored. The thing I had been pushing against for so long was gone, and I realized I had built my entire sense of motion around that resistance. Without it, I did not immediately know how to move. I went through a period of about 2 years where I was very quiet inside. Not depressed in the way people describe it, just very still, trying to understand who I was if I was not someone trying to earn something. Dahlia was patient with me, more patient than I had any right to expect. I started to look more clearly at what I had done with my life, not just the professional parts, the things that looked like achievement, the texture of my days, the quality of my attention. I had been so focused on one person's opinion of me that I had spent decades underinvesting in everyone else. I had a friend named Haroon from my university years. We had been genuinely close. He moved to another city in our early 30s. We stayed in contact for a while and then, slowly, did not. I had meant to visit. I had meant to call more often. There was always something else. He died 4 years ago. We had not spoken in nearly 8 years by then. I think about that. I think about the fact that I gave more energy to managing my father's impression of me than I gave to maintaining a friendship that actually sustained me. That is the thing I most want to say, and I find it difficult to say it plainly. He never deserved that much of me. Not because he was a bad man, but because no single person's opinion, no matter who they are to you, should be allowed to become the organizing principle of your life. He was one person, a limited person, a man who had his own wounds and no real language for them. He was not a standard I should have been measuring myself against for 6 decades. But I gave him that position. I handed it to him. And I maintained it long after he had stopped being able to do anything with it. Long after it had stopped making any sense. You cannot explain to someone who is not yet old how quickly the time goes. You hear that, but hearing it is not the same as standing at 76 and looking backward and seeing how much of your life you spent performing for an audience that did not have the capacity to give you what you needed. I am not angry at him. I made my peace with who he was and what he could not give. What I sit with now is the question of what I did with my own freedom. Because I had it. It was always mine. I just did not use it. Noor came to visit last month. We sat in this same room and talked for a long time. She is 40 now. She is a good mother. She is building something real with her family. At one point she said, "I feel like I know you better now than I did when I was growing up." I did not know what to do with that. It is one of the kindest things anyone has ever said to me. It is also one of the saddest. If you are watching this and you are younger than me, and nearly everyone is, I want you to think carefully about whose voice is loudest in your head when you are making decisions. Not whose voice is right, just whose is loudest. Sometimes that voice belongs to someone worth listening to, but sometimes it belongs to someone who was never actually qualified to judge you. Someone whose approval was always going to be incomplete or conditional or simply unavailable. And if that is the case, the question is not how to finally earn it. The question is how much longer you are willing to let it cost you. I do not have a way to recover what I gave to that particular pursuit. That time is gone. The friendships that thinned, the evenings I was only half present, the version of myself that might have developed differently if I had not spent so much energy on that one impossible task. What I have now is the time I have left, and I am trying to use it differently.
It is not nothing having clarity at 76, but I will not pretend it is the same as having it at 36. If any part of this stayed with you, I hope you will sit with it quietly for a while, not to feel bad, just to look honestly at what is taking up room inside you that perhaps should not be there. That is all I wanted to say.